Hello and welcome to the Leaders Who Love What They Do podcast and our live broadcast on LinkedIn. And in fact, it's our first. And in fact, it's the first that I've remembered to actually set the button to go live. So that's great to be here. Finally, I can see the live button and it's great to be seeing you here. So today, how to make effective goals that will take you to the next level. So are you someone who loves or hates setting personal goals? So clients often tell me that they don't enjoy this period of the time of the year when there's quite a lot of pressure to make resolutions for the new year, because they're making them in the knowledge that they're not going to keep them, and so feeling that sense of failure from the start. It's certainly not fun, and it's definitely not motivating. And before becoming a coach, I used to feel exactly the same, and I would set pretty similar goals each January with pretty similar results. And one year I decided, I remember, to get fit. This was going to be this was going to be my fitness year. And so I signed up to a 12-month membership at the gym, very excited. And I went exactly 4 times. So it was probably the most expensive treadmill run ever recorded. And in fact, I didn't even enjoy it either. So those kind of routines of setting goals and not really getting very far, I'm familiar with that, but I do have some little secrets for you today to help you to hopefully see goal setting and actually implementing them in a slightly different way. So in this podcast, I'm going to look at 2 different areas. Firstly, how to set goals that are actually effective. And secondly, what's the secret to actually seeing them through? So how to set goals that are effective. So first of all, and those of you who have been following me for some time will know that I come back to talking about purpose a lot. And I think with goals, it's fundamental. It's key. We need to come back to what is important to you and in your life, in your work, in your life, in your family, in your day-to-day life, in the whole lot, looking at the bigger picture, everything together. And starting here is vital. And why? Because this is your fuel. This is your fuel for moving forward. This is going to be the fuel for your motivation to continue when times are difficult and when you encounter failures or disappointments. So rethinking your purpose is also a chance to reevaluate where you are right now and thinking about your purpose as you are now, not as you were maybe 10 years ago, because we change and our purpose changes too. So taking that opportunity to really look again at what our purpose is right now is firstly extremely useful generally, but for goal setting, it's absolutely vital. So there are many ways to do this, and in coaching we spend a lot of time working on this and looking also at values, and it's a very interesting process coming to think about purpose and mission and values. But today I'm going to give you a very quick way of something that you can do on your own right now, and I would like you just to ask yourself a simple question. What do you want to be remembered and known for by your friends, family and colleagues? And then make a list of those things. And then think, how could you make those central to your life right now? And this, for me, this is where the goals start to happen. And these start to be goals that are rooted in what's important for us. And therefore, it's quite easy to put them into practice because they're aligned with what's important for us. Not maybe for someone else, but for us and us alone. The second step to all of this, to making goals that are actually effective, is something that's maybe a little bit counterintuitive, especially if you're used to being in a very fast-paced environment where SMART goals are very effective. Now, SMART goals, I'm not against them at all, but for this, in terms of personal development, I think SMART goals are not always the best choice at this first point where we're trying to think about purpose and we're going to be talking about vision as well. And why? Because it doesn't always matter how long it's going to take to get you there. If you're thinking about that bigger question, what would you like to be remembered and known for? Those kind of things, it might take a while. So if we can just step back a little bit and take off that SMART goal mentality, we start to think about things in a slightly different way. So SMART goals are very useful for short-term projects where the plan is very precise, the actions are generally easy to determine, not always easy to do, of course, but easy to determine. We can see a plan of action. It generally is quite linear. The results are measurable, they're concrete, and they're visible. When we're working on our personal development, the steps can be very visible, certainly, but the results are not always visible or measurable in the same way, because we're transforming the way we're living, the way we're working, the way we're thinking, what we're believing, and those kind of big results, those life-changing results, are not always easy to put on a list and to make part of your SMART goal template. The other thing is that when we start to think about goals in this much bigger, broader framework, we may not know at the outset how we're going to get there. In fact, we probably don't. If the goals are big enough and interesting enough and broad enough to be taking us in a direction that is going to change the way that we think, we probably don't know how we're going to get there. So those little steps, measuring those little steps, is maybe not going to be where you want to be. But if you're someone who likes SMART goals, and I'm one of those people, I like SMART goals, I like to know where I'm going, the steps that I'm taking, it can be very powerful to just try to relinquish that pressure of time. Because I would like you instead to focus on what it's going to look like when all of that is achieved. And so how do you do that? Well, I'd like you to write down in as much detail as you can, what would your life look like if you started to answer that question about how would you like to be remembered and known? So what would that actually translate into? What would that look like? So write that down in as much detail as you can. And that is going to really help you to focus on what the steps are. But don't worry about the time. We need to just start taking action every day, little bits, every day, thinking about how can we move, how can we step into that way of living and that way of being. And does it really matter if it takes more than 2 months, 3 months, 6 months? Probably not, because you are changing along the way. And this is the change that is very important, that ultimately is going to count. Now, it is a cliche, it's about the journey and not the destination, but it's so true. And it's interesting because the journey is the bit that we remember. If you think of any big goal that you've achieved, maybe you learnt to do something, and I'm sure you remember the moment when that goal, when you got to that goal. But I'm sure also that for the most part, you also remember the period leading up to that, and you probably, with hindsight, see that is where the change happened. That's where the value is in that period leading up to the goal. The goal itself is gone in an instant. It's gone in a flash. We have that moment where it all comes together. Maybe it's I managed to have the sales target was hit. Okay, it's hit. It's gone. But leading up to that, what happened leading up to that point? That's where it's interesting. And a part of that also is that the destination may well change, because when we start having this bigger picture, quite often we find that clients of mine, they will start with one destination, and very quickly that gets pushed into something bigger. The destination, the goal, the vision gets bigger. It becomes more expansive. So aiming for the destination, yes, we're keeping that in mind, but we can also be flexible about where that might be. But if we keep clear what the purpose is, then it gives us that direction. But being open to that journey as being that's the aim of it, really, that to me is truly a resolution worth keeping. So the second part of the podcast, what's the secret to implementation and success? So to me, there are 3 elements to this. So the first one, it sounds very obvious, but it's absolutely key, and it's actually setting the goals in the first place. And this is one of the biggest issues that I see, because if you're feeling overwhelmed by an already very long to-do list, why would you want to add another set of goals? When everything feels like a priority and life feels too busy and frantic, well, frankly, setting goals is too hard, and understandably, it doesn't feel like a solution. It feels like another problem. So tackling that feeling of overwhelm is often a step that we need to do before we're setting goals. So that's the pre-work, I would say. So that's the first thing. The second secret to implementation is that people I see who reach their goals are people who they are very clear that they have their own to-do list. And by that I mean they know that personal development, and this is what we're talking about, personal development is never going to be on the urgent list. Personal development is on the important list, but it's not going to be urgent. So what that means is that when we're looking at our management of our time, we may need to make an effort to block that time, block that investment of time and energy for personal development. And we can do that in lots of different ways. You could, for example, decide that on your way to work, you're going to listen to a podcast, or you're going to read a personal development article or a book, or you're going to meet up with a mentor or a coach at certain times. So you have to actually block in certain times or certain blocks of times in a week or a month, whatever it is, but you have to protect that personal development time, because otherwise it will get swallowed up by the important and urgent things that need to be done every day. The third thing that I would say that really characterizes people who fulfill their goals, who implement their goals, is that they know what they want. And we're coming back to this idea of vision, and coming back to what I said right at the beginning of this podcast. They know what the big vision is because they know what their purpose is. They know what is important for them in their lives, not just their work. They also understand the process of change. They understand that change in itself brings problems and challenges. They understand that it brings moments of doubt. Can I do this? Am I good enough for this? What will my family think? What will my colleagues think? That fear of judgment, of not being able to actually implement and take those steps. But when they have absolute clarity on why they want to change, they're very often able to move through that part. So learning or thinking very carefully about this, the vision of where we want to go is so important when it comes to actually implementing the goals. And I'm going to give you a very concrete example, a very common example. So a popular goal for a new year is to learn a new language, isn't it? It's one of the top ones. So imagine you want to learn a new language, and I ask you why. And you say, well, I want to learn a bit of Spanish so I can communicate with my colleagues in Mexico. I ask you, oh, why? And you say, because I want to improve our working relationship and be able to chat about family and friends and holidays, and be able to have a better conversation. And why is that? Well, because we need to connect better. We're not really connecting in the way that I would like to. So you can see the big vision is not about the language. It's not about learning Spanish. It's actually about improving that relationship and connecting better with those colleagues. So you can see that the big vision is not about learning vocabulary and grammar, or Spanish vocabulary and grammar. It's not about that at all. And what happens is when we really know and articulate this bigger vision, when we dig deep and ask ourselves, well, why do we want to do that? Why really do we want to do that? What it does, it does this expansion that I was talking about. It expands the vision. It gives you this bigger vision, and it gives you something to really connect to. So here, I wanted to learn a new language because I want to connect better with my colleagues in Mexico, for example. So when we know this, we also gain another very important part of the puzzle. We gain a flexibility to consider other ways to reach that vision. So let's go back to this vision of better connection with our Mexican colleagues. So what else could we do? Well, we could, in non-COVID times, we could arrange a visit. We could send a little note. We could organise a virtual coffee. We could share the project of learning a bit of Spanish and maybe work together. We could be more thoughtful and think about the fact that maybe our colleagues in Mexico are working in a second language, so we could send the documents a little bit further in advance, if the documents are English. So we can be that little bit more thoughtful. So all of a sudden we have an array of things that we can do that will get us to the same place. So, and in fact, imagine if we did do all of that, the project is going to be so much more successful than just thinking, I need to improve my Spanish. So, just to recap, in order to set and implement effective goals, there is an overlap, as you have seen. You need to be clear about what you want and your purpose in life. You need to be clear about that big vision by asking why. And you need to be ready to invest time and energy into making it happen. And you need to protect that time and take action, of course. So if any of this resonates with you, we are having a webinar on the 24th of January. It's a live webinar, and you are invited to be my guest for that 1 hour special coaching style webinar. And we will be walking through how to start thinking about options, how to start planning your year ahead, how to start planning for your next career goals with this idea of being very expansive. So in this webinar, you're going to discover the different types of goals and learn how to set those more effectively, building on what I've been saying here today. But most importantly, we're going to look at how can we make that journey more enjoyable so that it doesn't feel heavy. How can we make that journey an absolute pleasure and really part of the adventure and to make it easy, in fact. So you will experience, I hope, a taster of what my clients experience every day. So a challenging yet supportive and energizing session. And also I will encourage you to commit to concrete action to start making the changes that you want to see. So to reserve your free place, it's very easy. Just go to bluebottlecoaching.com/events or click on the link below. I will add the link in just 1 minute, and or contact me in the messages on LinkedIn and I will help to get you registered for that. So just another reminder of that date. It's the 24th of January. It's 9 o'clock in the evening French time, 8 o'clock UK time. That is 3 o'clock Eastern time and 12 o'clock Pacific time. So I do hope that you can join me for that. Thank you very much for being with me today. Have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.